Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, where we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. There's another Friday night game in college football that normally would probably have more intrigue than it does right now, but to me, it actually has more intrigue because of the circumstances. Two non-Power 5 historically good programs in Boise State and San Diego State are playing each other. This game is at Boise State. This is an interesting game because San Diego State and Boise State historically have been, like I said, two of the best non-Power 5 programs, but they're both struggling this year. And let's break down and see who I think is going to win this game. Brady Hoke, he was San Diego State's coach back in the day, probably about 10 years ago, and then he became Michigan's head coach, and then he got fired. But now he's San Diego State's head coach again. And they are 2-2 to start the season. Now, last year they had a great season, but again, kind of like with Houston, they're kind of not doing as good this year, and they're starting out 2-2. And they had a loss to Arizona 38-20. That wasn't a great loss because Arizona is probably one of the worst Pac-12 teams this year, even though they are an improved team from when they were 1-11 last year. But San Diego State lost, and they were not very impressive in the game. They beat Idaho State 38-7. That's a good win over a bad team. They lost at Utah 35-7. Now this game right here, they just got bludgeoned. Utah is a great team, but still wasn't even competitive, and a lot of people thought it would be more competitive than it was. And then they barely beat Toledo at home 17-14. And they did get the win, and a win is a win, but they barely won over a MAC team. Quarterback Braxton Burmeister, he's a transfer from Virginia Tech. He only had 65 yards and an interception in the Toledo game, and that's not very good. So you don't want your quarterback stats to be like that, 65 yards and a pick in the whole game. And when he was at Virginia Tech, he was a lot better. He had a lot more yards, so I don't know if it's the scheme or he's just trying to adjust to his new team, but those are not good statistics right there. He did rush for 44 yards, and he can because he is more of a mobile quarterback, but still those passing numbers are not good. Jordan Byrd, running back, 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. He can play. San Diego State's usually had good running backs, but again, they're going to have to lean more on the run game since they're not getting the throwing game figured out. Makai Shaw, wide receiver, had 21 yards against Toledo. And on the defensive side of the ball, they have swarmed the field. To start this season, defensive lineman Garrett Fountain, he had 4 tackles against Toledo. Linebacker Michael Shawcroft had 4 tackles against Toledo. Linebacker Caden McDonald, 4 tackles and an interception. Another linebacker, Cooper McDonald, 3 tackles. And safety CJ Baskerville had 3 tackles against Toledo. So they play good defense against Toledo, but in their other games, they've given up 38 and 35 and only 7 to Idaho State. So they're a little shaky on defense, but they can play defense, evidenced by their win over Toledo. Now, on the Boise State side, there is turmoil. Andy Avalos is in his second season as the Boise State head coach, and they went 7-5 last year, and that's a disappointment considering where Boise State's been under Chris Peterson and Brian Harsin, where they were winning a lot of games, and has been probably the best non-Power 5 program in college football over a long period of time. But 7-5 was one of their worst records that they've had in many years, and they're starting out 2-2 this season. But what makes it even worse is that they had to fire offensive coordinator Tim Plow because Tim Plow wasn't getting it done. They gave up a lot of points, and they're not scoring a lot of points. So they probably need to fire their defensive coordinator as well. I don't know, I'm not saying that, but their offense is in the toilet. And that they brought in Dirk Cotter, he's in, and hopefully he can turn it around. But what the big news is Hank Bachmeier, the quarterback for Boise State, has entered the transfer portal, and he only had 93 yards and a touchdown against UTEP. But again, in their other games, they lost to Oregon State at Oregon State 34-17. They won at New Mexico 31-14. They beat UT Martin 30-7, and then they lost at UTEP 27-10. And that's the game that got Tim Plow fired because they only scored 10 points. And again, their defense, I'm not saying they need to fire their defensive coordinator as well, but giving up 27 to UTEP, usually Boise State in the past would never give up that many points. But Hank Bachmeier's in the portal. He's done. He's wanting to redshirt this season because he only played in 4 games, which you can do that in college football. And then he's going to go and probably transfer another program for his last 2 seasons. But that hurts for Boise State because he's been their quarterback for years. And he was a good quarterback, but they weren't winning as much as they were in the past. George Halani, 75 yards on the ground against UTEP. He's a running back. Latrell Caples at 32 yards against UTEP is a wide receiver. Wide receiver Stephon Cobb's at 31 yards and a touchdown. I mean, those are two decent receivers, but you're not getting the ball to him. Only 32 and 31 yards. Hank Botmeyer, he's a good quarterback, but he only had 93 yards. So again, I think a lot of that was on Tim Plow, the offensive coordinator. And then on the defensive side of the ball, defensive tackle Herbert Gums Jr. at a tackle, safety J.L. Skinner at 2 tackles, cornerback Caleb Biggers at 4 tackles, linebacker Dimitri Washington at 3 tackles, and linebacker DJ Schramm at 3 tackles against UTEP. Boise State's played some good defense this year. They've also played some bad defense. Like I said, UTEP, bad defense. Oregon State, they have bad defense, but they have better defense against New Mexico and UT Martin. Again, their defense is probably better than their offense, but their defense needs to do better because they have a lot of talent, and they need to do better because they can play defense. We've seen Boise State shut a lot of people out in the past. Their offense, again, that's why Tim Plow's gone. They were not scoring points, and they're giving up too many points, and that's not a recipe to win. Who's going to win this game? Both teams are kind of in shambles right now. I'd say Boise State's in more shambles than San Diego State. This game is at Boise State, but with the offensive coordinator being fired and you have your quarterback leaving, quarterback Taylon Green, he's going to fill in for him. He had 155 yards against Oregon State. He's shown he can play, so we'll see. I don't know how good he's going to be, because, again, I only know Hank Botmeyer. I have not seen Taylon Green play much except the Oregon State game, and he was decent in that game. So I think he can get it done. I think San Diego State, I think their defense has played shaky at times as well. Both teams have been shaky on both sides of the ball. Their offense at times has been bad, and their defense has been bad at times. But I am going to say that Boise State's going to rally together under Taylon Green and their new offensive coordinator, and they're going to win at home 24-21. I think San Diego State could easily take advantage of Boise State's turmoil and win this game, but I do think Boise State's going to hold on and win 24-21, but it's going to be close. Subscribe to the channel for more sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about this Boise State San Diego State game and who you think is going to win and why, and I will see you next time.